Today, we're going to jump into a subject that's, well, it's pretty complex, but also incredibly human. We're talking about how the Scottish legal system figures out compensation for a future that's been turned upside down by a serious injury. Let's get into it. So let's just start with the biggest question of all. I mean, how on earth do you put a price tag on a future that someone was supposed to have, but now never will? It's not about what's happened in the past, it's about everything that would have happened. How does a court take all those lost wages, a lifetime of needing care, and turn it into one single number, paid out today?
And this slide, right here, really lays out the challenge perfectly. See, calculating what's already happened, that's the easy part. It's basically just accounting, right? You've got receipts, you've got pay slips, it's all there in black and white. But future loss, whoa, that's a whole different ballgame. That's about predicting the unpredictable. It's a world of projections, estimates, and a whole lot of assumptions about a life that will never quite be.
Okay, so how does the law even begin to handle all that uncertainty? Well, the entire system is built around one single core idea. You get the whole payout for your entire life all in one go. And this is what's known as the lump sum principle. You heard that right. In pretty much every case, you get one check. That's it. And that one amount has to cover every single cost, every single loss, for the rest of your life. There are no second chances, no do-overs if the money runs out. Now, this is where it gets really interesting because your gut instinct is probably to just do some simple math, right? If you're going to lose $10,000 a year for 30 years, well, that's $300,000. Easy. But nope. In fact, the law says that would be overcompensation. So why is that? Well, the answer comes down to this concept called accelerated receipt. Think about it. If someone hands you a check for £300,000 today, instead of giving you £10,000 a year, you're not just going to stuff it under a mattress, are you? You're going to invest it, and that investment will earn its own money over time. So the initial lump sum has to be a smaller amount, carefully calculated, so that with some smart investing, it'll grow to perfectly cover that £10,000 loss every year for all 30 years. So the big question then is, how do they actually figure out that exact number? Well, there's a master formula for that, one designed to turn decades of future needs into a single, concrete figure. And it all boils down to a surprisingly simple two-part formula. First, you work out the multiplicand. That's just a fancy word for the amount of money lost each year. Then you find the multiplier. This is the magic number. It's the number of years, but it's been adjusted to account for that investment potential we were just talking about. Multiply one by the other, and bam, there's your lump sum. So just to make sure we've got it, the multiplicand, that's the raw annual financial damage. You know, the hole in your paycheck or what you have to pay a caregiver each year. The multiplier, that's the secret sauce. It's not just 30 years, it's a special number from these official tables that does all the heavy lifting on the investment math for you. And where do they get this magic multiplier from? Right here. They're called the Ogden tables. Think of them as the official rulebook for these calculations, published by the government's own actuaries. And they're used all across the UK. They are the absolute bedrock of this whole process. Okay, but to build those tables, you need one final, critical piece of the puzzle, something called the discount rate. It's basically the government's prediction for investment returns. And here's the part that might just surprise you. In Scotland, the current discount rate is negative 0.75%. Wait, a negative rate? What does that even mean? Well, it's a massive deal. It's basically the government saying they expect that once you factor in taxes and inflation, a safe investment will actually lose a little bit of value in real terms each year. And the result of that? The starting lump sum has to be bigger to make up for that loss. This one little number makes a huge difference in the final payout. All right, so now that we've got the formula down, let's look at how it's actually used for all the different parts of a person's life, what lawyers call the heads of loss. Future wage loss. This is usually the big one. Your multiplicand is the difference between your old paycheck and your new, probably smaller one. And the multiplier? That's pulled from the Ogden tables for your expected working life, and it's even adjusted for things like the normal statistical risk that you might have gotten sick or lost your job anyway. Now for future care, it's a similar idea, but with a really important twist. The multiplicand is still the annual cost of that care, but the multiplier, it's based on your whole life expectancy, not just your working life, because of course, your need for care doesn't just stop when you retire. For really serious injuries, this can easily be the biggest part of the entire claim, by a long shot. And of course, it doesn't stop there.
The formula also has to cover all sorts of other things: future medical treatments and surgeries, the money you've lost from your pension pot, and the often huge costs of things like adapting your house or buying a specialized wheelchair. Each of these gets its own careful calculation.
But there's also this one really interesting exception. What if you can go back to your old job, but if you ever got laid off, you'd have a really hard time finding another one because of your injury? That's where a Smith versus Manchester award comes in. It's not a strict formula. It's more of a broad lump sum, maybe a couple of years' salary, to account for that future risk on the job market. Okay, so we've got all this complicated math, these actuarial tables, all these different heads of loss. But what's the one thing, the absolute foundation, that makes sure the final number is actually fair and accurate? Well, you can have the sharpest lawyers and the most detailed spreadsheets in the world, but at the end of the day, everything, and I mean everything, is built on the medical prognosis. It's the expert medical opinion on what the rest of someone's life is actually going to look like, their treatment, their needs, their limitations. And that's why timing is just so critical. If you settle a claim before the doctors are really sure about the long-term outlook, you're basically taking a massive gamble. You're locking in a number, and since you only get that one payment, making that call too early could be a catastrophic mistake, leaving someone without the money they really need years down the road. You know, it's so important to remember what's at stake here. This is not just some academic math problem. As this quote makes clear, this calculation is what will fund the rest of a person's life. It's their income, their medical care, their family's security. Getting it right is absolutely everything. Which, brings us right back to where we started. The system takes all this uncertainty and all this human need and boils it down to a single number. It's a fascinating technical solution to a profoundly difficult problem. But is it the fairest way to do it? That's the real question, isn't it? Something to think about.